We're continuing our study of the book of Proverbs. In our first message, it was pointed out that in spite of all the information available to us, our generation is not a wise generation. We're not a wise generation because we've ignored God, and wisdom begins with coming to terms with God. Proverbs 1:7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. Proverbs 9. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. You can't be wise without coming to terms with God. If you ignore God, you will never be wise. Not complicated. Now, in our second message, we discussed some of the different ways we communicate with each other, and in particular, our use of generalizations and universals. A generalization is a statement that is true, but with some exceptions. A universal is a statement that is always true and with no exceptions. Now, the reason we spent time examining this subject of generalizations and universals is because the book of Proverbs is a book of generalizations. And if we approach it as being a book of universals, we will make some terrible errors in interpreting this book. Warren Wiersbe described the generalizations of the book of Proverbs this way. Proverbs, he wrote, is a book of principles, not promises. This is really important. If you get this wrong, you're going to make a mess of your understanding of Proverbs and maybe even how God is telling you to live your life. If we interpret this book as being a book of promises again, we're going to get into a lot of trouble. It's not time now. It is time now to start working our way through this wonderful book, a book from which I hope we will gain wisdom, and we can all use wisdom. Wisdom, we defined in our first sermon, is the art of skillful living. The art of skillful living. And skillful living is something we all need lots of. Now, Solomon opened chapter 1 of Proverbs by telling his readers that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. He then devoted the remainder of chapter 1 and to a certain extent the entire book of Proverbs pleading with his son to reject sin and embrace wisdom. I'm not sure his son did. In fact, his son kind of blew it. But it wasn't because his father didn't try. And he began by telling his son about the importance of children listening to their parents. Proverbs 8 and 9. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. They will be a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck. If you want to be wise, kids, listen to your parents. You've been told that already, haven't you? And if you're like me, you probably ignored it, but I will say it again anyway. If you want to be wise, listen to your parents. Now, Solomon is going to repeat this again and again throughout this book. In chapter 4, he wrote, listen, my son, to a father's instruction. Pay attention and gain understanding. Proverbs 6, my son, keep your father's commands and do not forsake your mother's teaching. I realize that these statements sound very old-fashioned, particularly in our modern society where the opinions of children are often held to be on par with or even better than the opinions of adults. Now, if you doubt this and can stomach it, watch a few of those family sitcoms on TV. If you do, you'll soon find that children are almost always wiser than parents. It's staggering, but they are. There'll be a crisis in the family, and some child who's 10 years old will give them the wise answer. It happens over and over and over again. When we talk about children listening to their parents, we have to live in a society that doesn't believe that. In our society, it's parents, listen to your children. Most of you in this room, however, are not surprised to hear that God really disagrees with this attitude. Proverbs 22:15, folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far from him. Jeremiah 4, my people are fools. They do not know me. They are senseless children. They have no understanding. 1 Corinthians 13:11. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish ways. And we could go on and on and on. And we will. I didn't turn the page. It's not nice to laugh at an old feeble me. 1 Corinthians 14:20. Brothers, stop thinking like children. Now we could go on and on and on. And we won't. The point being that children need to listen to their parents, hopefully wise parents, and learn wisdom. And God clearly does not believe that children are a fountain of wisdom. Now, the second thing we learn from this passage is that parents have the responsibility of educating their children. And Solomon's primary concern was that parents give their children an education in godliness. God has assigned parents, not the village, parents, the responsibility. I don't mean to get political, but it's just sort of like relieving parents of this responsibility is absurd. God doesn't relieve you or me of the responsibility. He's given us the responsibility of educating our children, and in particular giving them a spiritual education. And a spiritual education is one in which children learn about the God of the Bible and his instructions about godly living. God expects parents to make certain that their children know about God and his standards of righteousness. Now, I realize that the moment we talk about parents teaching their children about God, there's always the parent who says, and I've heard it many times, I don't want to force my religion on my children. Children, these parents say, should be free to work out their own spiritual beliefs and find out what's best for them. Now, this attitude is absolute nonsense. Of course, we should force our children to learn about God, and in particular the God of the Bible, which is what's best for them. I wouldn't want to force my child. Wait a minute. We force our children to do all sorts of things and feel perfectly justified in doing so. So why not force them to learn about God? We force our children to go to school. If we didn't, some wouldn't go. We force them to eat what we want them to eat. We force them to sleep when we want them to sleep. We force them to bathe themselves and brush their teeth. We force our children to do a whole host of things. So why not force them to learn about God? Or are you suggesting that brushing their teeth is more important than learning about God? Teeth force. God, no. Why is that sensible? Of course it's not. If you think that God does not expect you to force your children to learn about him, then you're kidding yourself. Wonderful passage in Deuteronomy. God said to the Israelites, these commandments that I give you today are to be upon your hearts. Impress them on your children. The word impress here is to leave them, is to force so as to leave a mark. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. God says to the Israelites, impress these commandments on your children. Force these commandments on your children so as to leave a mark. I want them, when they leave your home, to know the right, my standards of right and wrong. Now, Solomon continues to teach his son about wisdom by warning him against keeping bad company. Verse 10. My son, if sinners entice you, do not give in to them. If they entice you, do not give in to them. Now, in calling men sinners in this passage, Solomon was not speaking of them as sinners in the general sense, because all men are sinners. Solomon was referring to those hardcore sinners who make sinful behavior their passion in life. What Solomon was telling his son was this: don't hang out with the bad guys, regardless of how much fun they might seem to be having. Son, stay away from bad company. We all know this, we all know that kids need to stay away from bad company because the person who hangs out with bad company often ends up doing bad things. Proverbs 14. Is this a wise book or what? Stay away from a foolish man, for you will not find knowledge on his lips. Proverbs 24. Do not envy wicked men. Do not desire their company, for their hearts plot violence, and their lips talk about making trouble. Bad company can often be very tempting to a young man or woman. Bad company is often more exciting than the company of do-gooders who follow the rules and do their homework. Bad company offers a sinfully easy way to the enjoyable life. Bad company says, in effect, do what comes naturally. Do what you feel like doing. The problem with a statement like is this: what comes naturally is sinful behavior. What we often feel like doing is what's sinful. We all have sin natures, and guess what sin natures like doing? Sinning. Bad company says, in effect, you don't have to wait until you get married to enjoy the pleasures of married life. Skip the marriage, enjoy the pleasures of married life without all the responsibilities. Bad company says, why struggle to work through the problems of living in a difficult world? Problems that cause so much pain and discomfort. Don't struggle. Just take a few drinks. Pop a few pills. Snort some of this white powder. The pain will vanish and you'll feel good. Don't struggle. Snort. Sadly, it's overwhelming in our society. Just exactly what I said. Bad company offers a sinfully easy way to the enjoyable life. Don't struggle, pop. Don't have a hard time, snort. Bad company offers a sinfully easy way to the enjoyable life. And it all seems so easy, so attractive, but as Solomon will soon point out, the sinfully easy way to the enjoyable life will in the end lead to a disaster. Staying away from bad company is not a small issue. It is not. One of the biggest problems children have is peer pressure. Most kids are led astray by their friends, not their parents. Keep this in mind, kids. Anyone who encourages you to take the sinfully easy way to the enjoyable life is not your friend. He or she is not your friend. Verses 11 through 19. In these verses, Solomon continues to warn his son against keeping bad company, and in particular, those who want him to become a criminal. They're out there. If they say, come along with us, let us lie in wait for someone's blood. Let's waylay some harmless soul. We will get all sorts of valuable things and fill our homes with plunder. Throw in your lot with us, and we will share a common purse. Why work when you can steal? My son, Solomon continues, do not go along with them. Do not set foot on their paths, for the feet rush into sin. They are swift to shed blood. These men lie in wait for their own blood. They waylay only themselves. Such is the end of all who go after ill-gotten gain. It takes away the lives of those who get it. You go out and live in a life of crime, you do yourself in. A life of crime, as one writer put it, pays a cruel dividend. Those who devote themselves to crime and violence will in the end become the victims of crime and violence. It's easy to see. Most mobsters usually end up being killed by their fellow mobsters or imprisoned by the government. Those men and women who devote themselves to crime and violence invariably get caught and are punished. They may get away with it at first, but if they keep it up, they will almost certainly get caught. And if they aren't punished here on earth, they will be punished in eternity. So you can't win. Underlying this warning against living a life of crime is a larger theme. And that theme is this: It is foolish to take the sinfully easy way to the enjoyable life, because the sinfully easy way can lead to destruction. For example, drinking and taking drugs to ease the pain of living in a difficult world can lead to the even bigger problem of addiction. Being sexually promiscuous for a few moments of pleasure can lead to terrible diseases and destroy marriages and families. Being lazy and refusing to work because work is so exhausting can lead to poverty and destitution. It's not politically correct to say that anymore. Isn't that interesting? I grew up in East Tennessee. We talked about laziness a lot because we were surrounded by it in Appalachia. Al Cap, the cartoonist, wrote about it. He's not politically correct anymore. It's sad. Solomon will have a lot more to say on these subjects that we just mentioned. But the bottom line is this. If you take the sinfully easy way to the enjoyable life, in the end you will lose. Or Solomon put it in verse 18, those who take up the sinfully easy way lie in wait for their own blood. They waylay only themselves. Such is the end of all who go after ill-gotten gain. It takes away the lives of those who get it. The question that naturally arises at this point is this: what can we do to defend ourselves against being sucked into a life of sinful behavior? The answer in the book of Proverbs is to embrace wisdom. Wisdom, the writer of Proverbs tells us, will help us make good decisions and avoid making bad decisions. Unfortunately, many men and women refuse to embrace wisdom. To illustrate this, Solomon personifies wisdom. That is, he takes this intangible virtue called wisdom and makes it into a woman. And he tells us that this woman called wisdom walks the streets of the world crying out to be embraced. She walks the streets of the world crying out to be embraced. Proverbs, beginning at verse 20. Wisdom calls aloud in the street. She raises her voice in the public squares. At the head of the noisy street she cries out. In the gateways of the city she makes her speech. How long will you simple ones love your simple ways? How long will mockers delight in mockery and fools hate knowledge? If you had responded to my rebuke, I would have poured out my heart to you and made my thoughts known to you. Isn't it sad? Here's wisdom crying out, embrace me, embrace me, embrace me. I'll give you wisdom. And people ignore her. Now, in this passage, Solomon tells us that wisdom speaks to three classes of people: the simple ones, the mockers, and the fools. The simple man is the man who believes anything. Proverbs 14:15 tells us that exactly. A simple man believes anything. And the simple man is the man who is naive. The simple man believes anything because he examines nothing. He is gullible and easily led astray. The mocker is the man who is proud and arrogant. Chapter 21 of Proverbs. The proud and arrogant man, mocker is his name. He behaves with insolent pride. The mocker is the man who knows a lot. He even knows about the wisdom of God, but has rejected it. And not only has he rejected God's wisdom, he mocks and scorns and encourages others to do the same. The mocker is the man who thinks he knows everything. He's full of himself. We see these men and women among the intellectual elite in Western civilization. The third man is the fool. The fool is the man who only sees this world and nothing beyond it. He is totally wrapped up in the here and now. Proverbs 17, the fool's eyes wander to the ends of the earth, to the ends of the earth, not to heaven, not eternity, just the earth. That's all he sees. This third man that Lady Wisdom mentions is the man who's not interested in spiritual matters. He's not interested in gaining wisdom. He is the man who can't see beyond this world and doesn't want to. He's completely materialistic. All he cares about is having a comfortable life right now. The future can take care of itself. Give me a comfortable chair, a refrigerator full of beer, and lots of sports on TV. That's all I want. We laugh. I have friends like that. One friend in particular, it grieves me. That's all he cared about. It's a world filled with people like that. They don't care about anything in the future, just the here and now. God calls them fools. Now, Lady Wisdom asks these three sinners how long they will continue to reject her. Verse 22 and 23. How long will you simple ones love your simple ways? How long will mockers delight in mockery and fools hate knowledge? If you had responded to my rebuke, I will have poured out my heart to you and made my thoughts known to you. How long will these three classes of people reject wisdom? We're not told. But the scriptures don't hold out much hope for them, especially for the mockers and the fools. In Proverbs 9, we're told that talking with a mocker is probably a waste of time. Proverbs 9. Whoever corrects a mocker invites insult. Whoever rebukes a wicked man incurs abuse. Do not rebuke a mocker, or he will hate you. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love you. The reason that it's probably a waste of time talking with a mocker is because most mockers already know pretty much everything the Christian is going to say. The only reason they like talking to Christians is because they like to tell us what fools we are. And if possible, talk us out of believing. But all we can do for the mocker is to pray for him. Fools don't do much better. According to God, do not speak to a fool, for he will scorn the wisdom of your words. Proverbs 27. You cannot separate fools from their foolishness, even though you grind them like grain with mortar and pestle. Strong statement. You can't separate them. They're determined to be fools. Mockers are determined to be mockers. Fools are determined to be fools. Scary, isn't it? Now, there seems to be little hope for the mocker and the fool, but Lady Wisdom does seem to hold out a little hope for the simple man or woman. Proverbs 1, you're going to get a whole study of Proverbs in one sermon here. Proverbs 1 and 4, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for giving prudence to the home. The simple. Psalm 19, the law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, making wise the simple. Psalm 119, the unfolding of your words gives light, gives understanding to the simple. So there's hope for the simple, not much for the mocker and the fool. Lady Wisdom walks the streets crying out to be embraced. And if you don't embrace her, there will be terrible consequences for refusing to embrace her. And the first consequence is that wisdom will laugh and mock you. Verses 24 through 27, but since you rejected me, that is wisdom, since you rejected me, Lady Wisdom, when I called and no one gave heed when I stretched out my hand, since you ignored all my advice and would not accept my rebuke, I in turn will laugh at your disaster. I will mock when calamity overtakes you. When calamity overtakes you like a storm, when disaster sweeps over you like a whirlwind, when distress and trouble overwhelm you. When those things happen, you cry out, I will laugh at you. Now, the second consequence of rejecting wisdom is that wisdom may in time reject you. Verses 28 and 29. Then they will call to me, that is to wisdom, but I will not answer. They will look for me, but will not find me, since they hated knowledge and did not choose to fear the Lord. The idea of time running out for wisdom is both a temporal and an eternal idea. The temporal aspect is seen in the lives of men and women who have rejected wisdom, and then when they get into trouble, they cry out for wisdom, but find that it's too late. Wisdom doesn't answer. For example, imagine a man planning to sail the Atlantic Ocean from the United States to England in his little sailboat. He's a know-it-all, like the mocker. And he refuses to listen to the advice of the old sailors who try to tell him how to prepare for the trip. He ignores their advice and sets sail. After a week or so, he finds himself in the middle of the Atlantic and his boat is sinking. He cries out for the wisdom those old sailors tried to give him. But it's too late. They're on the shore, and he's sinking in the middle of the Atlantic. Verses 28 and 29, then you will call to me, but I will not answer. They will look for me, but will not find me, since they hated knowledge and did not choose to fear the Lord. All too often, men ignore wisdom, and when they find themselves in trouble, it's too late to do anything about it. There's also an eternal aspect to this issue of running out of time. There's a time beyond which it will be too late for men to call out to God for salvation. When that time comes, men will call out for salvation, and God's answer will be Matthew 7, I never knew you, away from me, you evildoer. Now, the old folks, a bunch of folks out there say, oh, God's too loving, never do that. That's not what God says. You're going to take your advice from the fools or from God? The fools or from God? Chapter 1, Solomon began his book on wisdom by urging his son to pursue wisdom, or if you will, pursue the art of skillful living. That's what we're trying to do here. Develop the art of skillful living. God not only wants you to be saved, not only wants you to be part of the kingdom of God, not only wants you to spend eternity with Him, with sins forgiven, clothed in the righteousness of Christ, He wants you to live life skillfully while you're down here. The starting point, we're told in chapter 1, is the fear of God. Solomon closes chapter 1 by having Lady Wisdom compare the destinies of those who refuse to embrace wisdom with those who do embrace wisdom. They rejected my advice. That's wisdom, Lady Wisdom again. They rejected my advice and paid no attention when I corrected them. Therefore, they must eat the bitter fruit of living their own way, choking on their own schemes. The simpletons will turn away from me to death. Fools are destroyed by their own complacency. But all who listen to me will live in peace, untroubled by fear of harm. Great advice. So go be wise, okay? Father, we love you. We worship you. We thank you. We thank you for opening up wisdom to us and making it available. I pray that as Lady Wisdom cries through the halls of this church, every one of us will embrace her and live skillful lives. Help us do that, we pray, in Jesus' name.